This is Fox 5 Local News at 6.
He's always going to be mayor for life.
Right now at 6, remembering Marion Barry.
There's not a single thing in D.C. that does not have Marion Barry's imprint on it and his legacy in it.
The district pauses to reflect on the life and legacy of one of the city's most influential lawmakers with a bigger-than-life personality.
I care deeply, particularly those who didn't have a voice, don't have much hope.
Good evening and thanks for joining us tonight. I'm Maureen Ume. Our top story, the mayor for life, Marion Barry, has died.
And I'm Matt Ackland. Much of the District of Columbia is in mourning tonight following the passing of the four-time mayor of Washington. This was a scene in Southeast tonight, blocks away from Barry's home. People chanted in the streets to remember him. Earlier, there was a vigil outside his home. News of Barry's death has come as a shock to many. Mayor Gray ordered flags to fly at half-staff across the city. Barry died after midnight in a hospital in Southeast. It happened just hours after he was released from Howard University Hospital. We're told Barry was feeling better. He even had something to eat and then collapsed as he approached his home. We have team coverage tonight from across the city, and we are going to get to our reporters in just a moment. But first, in June, when Marion Barry began his book tour, he sat down with me to talk about his life, including his accomplishments, his missteps, and how he wanted to be remembered. When we spoke to Marion Barry this summer, he was still getting his strength back after spending several weeks in the hospital and rehabilitation center. You feeling okay? You seem like you're doing well.
Well, I had this very serious blood infection, which knocked me to my knees. I couldn't walk. I couldn't stand up. I couldn't lift a piece of paper.
Barry brushed off all the talk about his health. Instead, he wanted to talk about his life, his new book that started with his early childhood.
I grew up black, poor, with parents who were sharecroppers, who only went to the 3rd or 4th grade in school. I went to a one-room schoolhouse.
Barry seemed to light up as he talked about helping others while mayor, starting a youth jobs program, helping seniors.
No other mayor that I know could have done all these things that we did because we had good staff and we had a mayor with a vision.
When we asked him about that infamous 1990 arrest at the Vista Hotel, he didn't want to dwell on the crack or the prosecution.
I have apologized to Rashida Moore and her family, to Effie and Christopher and my family. I apologize to the citizens of Washington and to the nation. And this is a country of second chances.
We wrapped up the interview by asking the former mayor, when the time comes, how will he want to be remembered?
In a few words, is I cared deeply about everybody, particularly the last, the least, and the lost, particularly those who didn't have a voice, don't have much hope of getting ahead, of breaking out of this system. And secondly, that I made a big difference, a tremendous difference in the quality of life of so many people.
He really worked hard until the end. I saw him just about a week and a half ago at a homeless shelter. Yeah. He had been attending a meeting there, and he wanted to talk about what he could do for these people and also just bring more jobs, more homeless relief to Ward 8. He always had the focus on Ward 8. He was really concerned about those people left behind.
And you know, I tweeted earlier that Marion Barry was D.C. and D.C. is Marion Barry, and I think that holds so true because this is a man who dedicated his life to the people.
For sure.
And despite whatever transgressions anyone might talk about, he cared about the people, and that overwhelmingly has been the sentiment on social media and from just people I've talked to on the streets today.
Yeah, as reporters, you and I see that all the time. We saw how he interacted, and he really pushed to make life better for folks here.
Indeed he did. All right, so love him or hate him, almost everyone in the city has an opinion about Marion Barry. Barry was a complicated man and a complicated leader. And yet tonight, the city is united in mourning one of its most visible and vocal champions. Fox 5's Marina Morocco's life near the Big Chair in Southeast, where many have gathered to remember the D.C. icon. Marina, tell us what's going on right there right now.
Yeah, Maureen, you can really feel just the sense of appreciation and overall love that this community had for their mayor. And some people even called him a father figure. And you can take a look behind me here. You'll see the crowd that is gathered here at the emblematic big chair. They just walked from his home down here to remember him. They're holding a candlelight vigil just as we're speaking here. They're going to release balloons, and one by one people are telling stories of how Marion Barry helped each and every individual here. You can hear them clapping and cheering for that person that they refer to as their father. Now, they honor him in his very neighborhood tonight. People here want to honor his legacy, honor his hard work, and honor those that he helped as well, but not shine a light on the negative. And so many times over tonight, we've heard that just as they marched down here. We spoke to some folks visibly torn up over his death. One line that definitely stood out was, he did more harm to himself than to any of us. And I think that really speaks to his legacy. It speaks to who he was. Every single person that we've run into tonight said that he either helped them personally or someone in their family. Now, one couple that we spoke with say they benefited from that summer program. Take a listen to how they're remembering him tonight.
You know, all of us benefited from the summer job program. I see him every Sunday at church. We've sat for hours, he and my pastor talking, and just the benefit of his wisdom. You know, he was always down to earth, always remembered you no matter what. You know, he will always be my mayor, always be my councilman. And I just pray that the next person who steps into that role for Ward 8 knows the shoes they need to fill.
And just as we drove up to his home, people were shouting at our live truck his very name, Marion Barry, just remembering him. And tonight, his family and friends want to continue to remember him. And there was also a previously scheduled Oprah interview that was to air tonight, and it's still going to air as planned at 9 tonight. So his friends and family will gather at the old Congress Heights School for a watch party, because that's what Marion Barry would have wanted. Now, Fox 5's Alexandra Lamone is at Union Temple Baptist Church, where Sunday Mass took place this morning, this time without Marion Barry. Alex?
Well, you mentioned Marion Barry had a lot of hard times in his life, and some of those were caused by his health, others by the mistakes he maybe made. But the thing that people here at the church he attended tell me stood out about him was the fact that he was always able to get back up on his feet and keep going and do things for the community. And that's what they will always remember about him. Singing and praising, dozens of worshipers remembered Marion Barry. At Union Temple Baptist Church, the seat normally occupied by DC's mayor for life remained empty. The leader of the church, Pastor Willie Wilson, was with Barry when he died early Sunday.
He was gone before he got to the hospital, actually. In the ambulance, there was no response in trying to revive him. And then again at the hospital, they tried to no avail.
The beloved yet controversial DC icon died at the age of 78.
He's done so much for this community. I mean, as far as making sure that there was affordable housing for low-income people, or making sure on Thanksgiving that the community is fed, or just making sure that the youth have summer jobs.
He was a wonderful person, and if he could help somebody, he would.
But even Barry's biggest fans and closest friends admit he always made headlines, and not always for the right reasons.
TMZ, for example, did a headline today, "Crackhead Mayor Dies." You know, that's just a very small portion of what his life was all about.
Still, the community he served found a way to look past all of that because of his service to others.
He still is a person, and he's still worthy of forgiveness.
Just a week or so ago, he called me and he said, well, after the election, let's get together and see if we can work to develop some housing, some moderate housing in this city for many of the residents who are being caught up in this whole gentrification and who cannot stay in this city. So always concerned to the very end.
And the sense I got from people here in the community is they really just can't believe he's really gone. They say nobody will ever be able to fill his shoes. Maureen?
Alexander Lamone, and we will be talking more about that TMZ headline just a little later in the program. But for now, we thank Alexander Lamone and Marina Morocco for their reports. Matt?
Maureen, thank you. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton joins us now. You have known Mr. Berry for, since the 1960s when you met in the South.
Yes.
Your initial reaction tonight?
Well, my first thought was of his family, and I send my condolences this evening to that family. My first thought, of course, was of Barry's roots, because those roots followed him throughout his life. Marion wanted always to be where the action was. Well, he was in graduate school when the sit-in started. That's not where the action was. So he had to go to where the action was, the sit-in movement. And leader that he was, he became the first chair of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And isn't it interesting that before the Civil Rights Movement was quite over, he understood somehow strategically that he had to find the next place for it. And the most disempowered people in the United States, people for whom the Civil Rights Movement could do very little, would be in the District of Columbia. So he moved from down south to up south.
Congresswoman, what made him so popular? I would go to events when I was a young reporter here, and I couldn't believe the people that would want to go up and touch him. Was it his charm? Was it his accomplishments? What made him so popular in this city, especially east of the river?
Well, Marion had the ability to make people love him. Now, most politicians covet that ability.
Right.
And I think one of the reasons they loved him, because they identified with his struggles. That is to say, people whom he represented, and remember this was a 70% black city when he was first elected, had all known struggles. So if you talk about Marion's struggles, somehow they understood that and identified more and more with him the more you talked about his struggles and the more you talked about his faults.
Are you concerned that he could be remembered for what happened in 1990 more so than his accomplishments here in the district?
Well, he was concerned.
Yeah.
That's why he wrote this book. That's why whenever he went to talk about it, he wanted to remind people of all he had done. Because after all, there's been some time there since he was our fourth mayor. There would have been a number of people who didn't live during that period. And I am very pleased that he got to write this book and got to market it as only Barry could have. Because it does seem to me that with the book, with Oprah, where he was scheduled even tonight,
yes,
he will be remembered for more than those episodes, shall we call them.
And you'll eulogize him, or do you know that at this point?
We don't know anything about what will happen.
Yet. Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, we appreciate it as always. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.
Maureen, we'll toss it to you.
All right, thank you, Matt and Congresswoman. Stay with Fox 5 for continuing coverage on the passing of D.C.'s former mayor and councilman Marion Barry. We have the latest on our website, myfoxdc.com, and our Facebook page. You can also follow us on Twitter at Fox 5 News DC. And as we head to break, Marion Barry, in his own words.
That I made a big difference, a tremendous difference in the quality of life of so many people.
Tension is mounting across the St. Louis area tonight. The grand jury in the Michael Brown case is expected to announce its decision very soon, and protesters are already lining the streets. Fox's Garrett Tenney is live in Ferguson. So Garrett, set the scene for us tonight.
Well, Maureen, our sources tell us that the grand jury likely did not meet over the weekend, meaning they have not yet decided whether or not to charge Officer Darren Wilson in the shooting death of Michael Brown. And as that looming decision remains, Ferguson and really the St. Louis region as a whole are now preparing for the expected unrest with additional security measures. Barricades now surround the St. Louis County Courthouse, where the 12-member panel is meeting behind closed doors. Also around the makeshift command center set up by law enforcement in Ferguson. Yet sources close to the matter say a grand jury announcement is unlikely to come before Monday. No matter what the panel decides, activists and police want to prevent any potential street violence or unrest that resembles what erupted in August when Michael Brown was killed. President Obama says he has spoken to Governor Jay Nixon about having a plan in place for the announcement's aftermath and is calling for calm.
Using any event as an excuse for violence is contrary to rule of law and contrary to who we are.
For the past 3 nights, small groups of demonstrators have gathered outside the Ferguson police station, chanting slogans and slowing traffic with less than a handful of arrests made. They are demanding justice for Michael Brown and calling for widespread changes in police conduct and race relations.
We need justice for the rest of these mothers who are these people who are killing these kids. And they need to know that they just can't kill kids.
The grand jury is expected to reconvene tomorrow and continue deliberations on whether to bring those charges. And of course, we will stay on top of this story and bring you any updates as they come along. Maureen.
Garrett Tenney, thank you for that.
You got it.
All right, here are some of the other stories making news tonight. 3 people are dead after a violent crash in Silver Spring overnight. It happened on the east-west highway near Washington Avenue. Police say an SUV carrying 8 people lost control and crashed into a tree. 3 passengers in the vehicle were killed. 1 passenger was seriously hurt, and the other 4 had minor injuries. Police are investigating whether alcohol or speed played a factor in the crash. D.C. police are investigating a sexual assault that happened near the George Washington University campus Saturday night. Authorities say 3 men sexually assaulted a woman in an alley in the 2400 block of I Street. If you have any information about this, police would like to hear from you. Also in the district tonight, a former employee at Dunbar High School remains in jail, accused of having sex with 3 students. A judge ruled Charles Young be held in court until his next hearing on Tuesday. Young's lawyer tried to refute the allegations from the accusers and asked that his client be released. Authorities are asking anyone else who may have had inappropriate contact with Young to come forward.
As the district mourns the passing of Mayor for Life, Marion Barry, we're going to hear from Barry in his own words on how he wanted to be remembered.
I've been an inspiration to other mayors, particularly black mayors. They see Marion Barry doing this, getting minority contracts and doing this. They can say, thank God we had him there.
Welcome back. Joining us now is former D.C. Mayor Sharon Pratt. She served as mayor after Barry's 3rd term ended in 1991 and after his highly publicized conviction for drug possession. And then in 1994, Barry won back the mayor's seat by beating Pratt. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Yeah, sorry it's for this reason.
Absolutely. You two didn't always see eye to eye, but you respected each other. What do you think his lasting legacy will be?
Well, I think he pretty well was the political tour de force for the District of Columbia. He was always the story, whether he was actually the story, he was the subtext of the story. So I think that he was sort of pretty well defined the political culture of the city, and he was a wonderful advocate for the least of these.
Do you think that's why he was so beloved?
I think he was beloved because he did have that compassion, but I also think he represented an expanding population of the city. And so he was the best expression of a changing city that wanted raw activism in their public officials.
Was it challenging for you to take over mayor after him because he was such this larger-than-life figure? Was it challenging for you? And if so, what were some of those challenges?
It was challenging. He always was a part of the political conversation, even when he had, was away. So, it was difficult to get the government and get the city to appreciate that government couldn't be the employer of first and last resort. And so those were difficult changes, and it was hard to sell, given the fact that Marion was such an effective salesman himself in terms of saying, well, that is the way to go.
He was such an influential force and set the wheels in motion for a lot of things that we're seeing today. Do you think that he was pleased with what we're seeing of D.C. today, with all of the changes, all of the, the new residents, what we're seeing today? Was he pleased with this?
Well, I think we all appreciate that the city is growing, and I think everybody's happy about that. I think he was happy about that, provided we do not forget some of the history and a large swath of our city, especially east of the river. So I think he does not want the east of the river to be marginalized.
And that's what we're seeing all over social media today. So many people singing this man's praises for just being a champion for if you want to call him the little, I don't want to say the little man because no one is little in my viewpoint, but you know, for really being a champion for the people. What is it about him that you will remember specifically the most?
Well, he had a larger than life personality and a larger life opinion of himself too. So, you know, after he won for re-election, and he always said, Sharon, we have to get together for lunch and so forth and so on. He always wanted to get together to lunch to remind me that he whipped my derriere. And he always said, well, now sweet revenge was that I was to pick up the tab. So
I know,
he was a lot of fun.
Ms. Pratt, just very quickly, what are you doing with yourself these days?
Well, I've had my own firm, consulting firm for over 12 years. So part of what I'm doing is also dealing with some of the aftermath of the mortgage crisis and that sort of thing.
Well, it's great to see you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on Marion Barry as only you can. Thank you so much again for coming in.
My pleasure.
Sharon Pratt.
Delighted.
Thank you. All right, Matt, back to you.
All right, love those comments. There is much more ahead on Fox 5 Local News at 6. A live look outside. Take a look at that. Major changes in the weather to start the work week and a look ahead at that all-important Thanksgiving forecast. We're back in a moment.
Your world at the speed of Twitter. Follow Fox 5 at Fox 5 News DC.
Marion Barry came to D.C. as a young graduate student working in the civil rights movement. He served 4 terms as mayor and was a relentless champion for the people he represented. His 40-year legacy in Washington, D.C. was often punctuated by controversy, but the city will probably never see another quite like Marion Barry Jr. Melanie Alwick reports.
It's not that you get knocked down or fall down or get kicked down, that you get up. And I'm an example of someone who's gotten up, who's come back better and stronger than ever before.
Marion Barry describing himself in 1992, it could be said of the man, his political career and his life. Time and time again, a man redeemed, defying the odds over and over. Marion Barry Jr. was first elected D.C. mayor in 1978 after serving on the school board and city council.
I am now officially declaring victory. Right on.
Barry had catapulted onto the local political scene as a dashiki-wearing civil rights activist. Viewed as an upstart, he beat the city's first home rule mayor, Walter Washington, then went on to be elected to a second and third term. The edgy city paper dubbed him mayor for life, though many outside the city never understood the appeal. He was always popular on the streets of Washington, so was his regal-looking wife, Effie. He courted the elderly. A masterful politician, Barry pushed downtown revitalization, courted the business community. Voters never forgot the summer jobs he provided for young people.
Power to the people.
But by the end of the 1980s, there was grumbling